This time on Poll Hub, money is on our minds. How financially literate do you consider yourself, and from where did you get your information? Chances are it was less from formal education and more from on-the-job training. We go in depth. Then, what are the odds that you're going to be placing a bet on this Sunday's Super Bowl? We have brand new Maris poll numbers out on what Americans think of online and app-based gambling. Oh, and of course, we tackle who Americans want to win the big game. And Lee's calling foul on some wannabe football fans in this week's Fun Fact. This is Poll Hub. Let's kick it off. And hi, everyone. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Mary Griffith.
I'm Hunter Petro.
I'm Neil Viswanathan.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Maringoff.
Many Americans leave high school feeling unprepared to manage their finances. They often rely on trial and error rather than formal education to learn critical money management skills. For decades, Americans have relied on programs like 401ks and Roth IRAs to save for retirement. But the latest data from the Fed suggests these funds may not provide the stability once hoped for. So let's jump in. According to Pew, in December of 2024, 54% of U.S. adults said they knew at least a fair amount about personal finances. Now, financial literacy varies on income level. This includes 42% of low-income Americans claiming they knew at least a fair amount about personal finances, 56% of middle-income Americans, and 72% of upper-income Americans. The financial literacy that people do have, however, is not likely to come from primary or secondary education. That same Pew Research poll from December 2024 found that only 19% of Americans who believe that they are knowledgeable about their personal finances, at least partially, learned about them from K through 12 school. 19%. 49% at least partially learned from friends and family. 33% from the internet. 27% partially from college or university, and 24% at least partially from media. Now, this does make me jump right to a question for Barb. How did you learn about personal finance when you were our age? Was it something that you learned in school, or did you have to figure that out on your own later in life?
Well, you are making a really big assumption. When I got out of high school, or even when I got out of college and, looking for my first job, real job, I always had, I was always working at something, busy feet, busy fingers. But I don't think that it was as difficult at that time. Because if we go back historically, and this is something that has really changed over time. So for me and Lee, and particularly working in the academic area, and for those working in the academic area and those working in government, you don't have to struggle as much because you still have something you still have a retirement fund and pension opportunities that are guided by your employer. And so you're not really left out there on their own. People who don't have those structures and supports from the places where they are employed are in much more difficulty. But this really changed in the late 70s with something called the Revenue Act, which for the first time allowed employers to provide an opportunity for their employees to be able to put away their tax-free income. So if you saved a certain amount of money, you could do it through your employer, through 401ks. It was a way of deferring compensation. It was tax-free. It sounded like an awesome idea. And it was supposed to supplement other pension benefits and other retirement benefits that were provided by employers. But what has happened, over the last almost 50 years is that we have really moved from employer-supported pension funds. In fact, I think the pension funds for private industry is probably, around 10%, maybe 10 to 12% of those who are employed have that opportunity. And it's really left to the individual to be mindful of the money that they're putting away. There is no doubt that the optimism that surrounded that change, many decades ago, that Americans were going to be able to put away the needed amount of dollars, has certainly fallen short. And part of that is if you think about, if you're looking at a program in the 80s and the 90s, these were times where the stock market was accelerated and people made a lot of money by, investing themselves. But then, you have many downturns, the recession of in 2000 and 2008, 2009. So to have all kind of your eggs in the one 401k basket has left many Americans, short for their retirement futures.
And out of curiosity, you use all the eggs in that 401k reference. And I'm wondering, what did you, at least from your perspective, maybe Lee has a different one, what did you witness people doing after that recession, after that '08 crash? What were their moves to sort of save for retirement outside of 401ks and pensions and all that? Did they have a plan? Was it pull it out in cash, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, see, it was really tough. And for those near retirement age, so when they lost those savings because of the crash of the market, there was no way that they were going to be able to make up those dollars. So if they hadn't saved in other ways, I mean, it's what people do, when the dollars are short, when the income that they need to live on, is much higher than the income that they're getting. And so people had to cut back. Many people downsized in terms of homes, which is a part of the life cycle, but it was something that had to occur much faster. And in the context of, well, how am I going to be able to manage the income that I do have when I'm not working? So many people had to make a lot of choices. I think for those just starting out, in some industries, what you need to do is you need to find a money manager. That's not always an inexpensive venture. There are some, if you're working for larger corporations, or as I said, particularly in government or academic institutions, there are structures still in place to guide you. So, for instance, we have TIAA-CREF as, our retirement plan here at Marist. Marist provides, as many universities and colleges do around the country, they provide information and support through the money managers of TIAA-CREF. But it's very haphazard. And I think it was really interesting. One of the numbers that you talked about is that the more kind of money you have and the more moneyed people you're around, the more information you have and the more access to information you have. So it's kind of a catch-22. If you don't have a lot of money and you didn't grow up with a lot of money, you are much less likely to have information about how to manage that money. And so it kind of exacerbates the income disparities that we already see in other ways.
I've always found that in life, you tend to spend what you earn. And then there are things called credit cards, which you seem to, very often get a little bit over your reach there. But I think, as Barb said, I think it's very nice that in some settings where you have this employer-based pension support, because obviously Social Security is a nice thing, but it doesn't have the kind of revenue that people are going to maintain often their lifestyle with. One of the events I think that's affected this all was, of course, COVID, where people sometimes thought or sometimes experienced just a tremendous disruption in their employment pattern. And I think they started to think a little bit differently about long-term savings and retirement as opposed to short-term enjoying things while you can. And I think that was sort of a crossroads there.
So like Lee, you've taught at Marist for a very long time. And obviously, Barb, you've been here for a very long time as well. And like, according to this, the numbers say that financial literacy is not currently increasing. According to TIAA Institute, financial literacy has stayed relatively consistent since 2017, hovering around 50% for the past 7 years. Through your guys' tenures here, have you seen an increase in financial literacy in the higher education sphere at all?
I would say that it's really divided between people who are interested in wanting to know that and those who don't. It's almost this kind of divide that we often see when we talk about math. And although we can relate more, and we should relate more to our own finances, I think there's a real gap, and it's not new to your generation. I think what changed and what was most dramatic were these changes decades ago, because what that did was that moved the responsibility of retirement from your employer. So it was your employer who was taking the risk by investing pension funds. And if the stock market went up or down, or however they chose to invest that money, they were taking the risk. They still agreed with you as an employee to pay you a certain amount of money each month once you retired. So that risk went from businesses to individuals. And I know it's kind of hard for you guys to even imagine, but 4 in 10 workers 40 years ago basically didn't have to worry about this. This was supported by the organization, company, or institution that they worked for. And slowly over time, till we get to really your generation, where pretty much you're very much left on your own. And to prioritize benefits, I think, is something that a lot of people your age who are looking at their first job, they're assessing the benefits that company may be giving them.
Let's flip it, Barb, and ask them, because they're coming through the life phase that we're sort of on one end. They're coming into the job market in fairly soon order. How comfortable are you guys with the knowledge you have about investments, and how much of your job selection will be dependent upon what kind of pension is available 40 years from now for you, 50 years?
I definitely think I'm not extremely knowledgeable about all that. I'm trying to learn more, though. I've been working since I was 16, but for years I just had a checking account. I didn't have a high yield savings account. I didn't invest any of my money. And recently, the past couple of years, my aunt's been helping me, but I've started to put some money away into Fidelity. I opened up a savings account, and hopefully, once I graduate spring, whatever job I take, I don't think I'll be super concerned about the benefits yet, because I feel whatever company I work for, I probably won't be at long term. But I think within the next 10 years, definitely that's going to be a top priority, the benefits.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I'm someone who's always panicking about the future and, how will I survive? Will I survive? So when I turned 17, I really started researching my own, here's what I should be doing. I couldn't invest yet. I couldn't find a loophole to invest. It's very illegal to do so. So once I turned 18 on my 18th birthday, I opened up my brokerage and my Roth. And I've been funding both since. And it's all been purely my own research, YouTube videos, podcasts, reading news articles, staying up to date with Yahoo Finance and the Wall Street Journal and all of that. It's took about 2 to 3 years of consistent research on my own before I felt confident in my investments and my savings for the future. And I mean, that just should go to show you. I think, I never heard about a Roth IRA in high school. I knew that I should have opened up one of those. So, and I'm the one that has to tell all my friends, get a Roth IRA. Make sure everyone that's listening, make sure you have a Roth IRA.
Yes. And it's important for you guys to do it now, because, whatever you put away now really multiplies many-fold. So that is very good advice. I might also point out that there is often a significant gender gap when we look at this. And even a recent survey that we did at the Maris poll with Yahoo Finance has shown, when it comes to savings, there aren't a lot of people that are very satisfied with the savings that they are being able to put away right now. And this is particularly true for women. Men tend to start outpacing women in terms of saving early on. And unfortunately, we don't generally catch up. So yes, very significant issue. And I think one that colleges and all educational institutions need to recognize that there is a significant gap and something that we can do.
Well, Hunter, it certainly sounds like you're the financial quarterback for your family and friends. But now let's talk about some real quarterbacking and some real football. Sunday is the big day. It is Super Bowl Sunday, and we have a brand new Maris poll out about the Super Bowl, but not just about the Super Bowl, but about sports betting in and of itself and their views about online and app-based sports gambling. But first, let's get this out of the way, because I know this is really what's on Lee's mind. We asked Americans which team they think is going to win the Super Bowl come Sunday. And what we found is that nearly 6 in 10 Americans, 58%, say that they think the Kansas City Chiefs will win this year's Super Bowl. In contrast, however, almost the identical proportion of Americans, 57%, say they want the Philadelphia Eagles to win the big game. Now, here's something that's really interesting, is that 42% of Americans say that the referees of the Super Bowl will have a major impact on who wins the Super Bowl. and an additional 37% think that the referees or the officials will have at least a minor impact. So, Lee, I'm almost afraid to start with you, but go for it.
Well, I think that I'm not sure these numbers on the Eagles and Kansas City would have been the same 2 years ago when they matched up. I think what's happened to Kansas City is the success has bred some contempt at this point, and especially among football fans who've been armchair refereeing over the playoffs and even in the Super Bowl when they won 2 years ago against the Eagles when there was a pass interference call, or what Eagle fans would have called a phantom pass interference call. And that one seems to be getting every week. It's the same kind of problem. So I think right now there's this kind of like sentiment for the underdog, even though the odds are pretty close in the game, but there's a sense that, maybe these guys shouldn't repeat, and maybe the Eagles should have their say, and particularly for Giant fans who are rooting for Saquon Barkley. The Eagles it's hard to imagine Giant fans rooting for the Eagles, but you never know what's going to happen in life.
This has become quite a national event. Yeah. And it's not everybody is a football fan during the season. But, pretty much most Americans are football fans or will be on Sunday. And I think it has a lot to do with also what surrounds the football, everything from the Puppy Bowl to lots of food. Certainly the halftime show draws a lot of attention. And so there's a lot going on. I know we'll be having some festivities here.
Did you skip the commercials? Maybe you didn't.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. I mean, obviously the commercials are very important. I think what's interesting from our poll, and Mary, you can help me out with some of the numbers.
Absolutely.
Is that the plurality, though, of Americans actually watch the game to watch the game, despite all of these, kind of other favorites and things that we do enjoy that surround the game. It is the game that does attract most of the attention. But I think it was 22% also tune in for the commercials, the 17% show up for the food. And then there is a handful of folks who are also enjoying the fact that, well, you can gamble or at least become part of a friendly wager or pool that also surrounds the activity.
Yeah, before we move on to that sports betting theme, 19% tune in for the halftime show. That's another big draw, but not as much, obviously, as the game itself. But coming back to the idea about sports betting and gambling, more than 1 in 3 Americans say that they do, in fact, plan to place a bet on the Super Bowl this year. And that includes everything from a friendly wager or pool onward from there. 65% say they won't. Now, this didn't really surprise me too much. Perhaps it surprised you. But Gen Z and millennials are more likely than older generations to say they're going to put money on the big game. And men are a little bit more likely than women to do the same.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because I think we really are seeing somewhat of a sea change generationally in terms of, betting and the idea of gambling. I don't think there is, as much, I don't want to say concern, but it's not as socially unacceptable to wager on sports.
I was just going to say, Mayor, that when we get to this week, what's fun is that they've been showing a lot of highlights of giant victories of the past, because obviously there is nothing about the current Giants that's getting anywhere near today's rooting. Do you guys get up during the commercials and get some food, or do you get up during the game and get some food?
The food tends to be in the same vicinity as the game, so really it's the same on our end.
The food is laid out right in front of the television.
It's within an arm's reach. But just getting back to what Barb was talking about in terms of the concern over gambling. So we did ask and focus a lot of our current national survey on I guess maybe the acceptability of online betting and app-based betting. And what we found is that 65% of Americans, they either strongly support or somewhat support betting online or via an app. And that more than 3 in 4 Americans actually green light gambling. 76% say that people should be allowed to gamble on sports and use their money however they want to use their money. And only 24% say that gambling is wrong because it does promote or it can promote addictive behaviors. So again, many of the questions that we asked, there was this generational divide, as Barb pointed out, as well as a gender gap too. So let me bring in Hunter and Neil for just a second. Do any of these numbers surprise you at all? Neil, why don't we start with you? And of course, you don't have to talk about your own personal experiences. You are college students after all. But, let's talk a little bit about whether or not the generational changes surprise you, or, you're hearing mumblings from, your friends.
I actually thought that betting number would be a little higher. I know you said like we're in college, but I see a lot of college students like sports bet. I feel like the online sports betting kind of just made it like so much more available to younger people. I personally can't sports bet. It's not legal in the NCAA for athletes, but like a lot of my friends that aren't athletes, like I see them betting all the time, and I think it's become huge. So I'm actually surprised that number's only 35%.
Hunter, how about you?
I don't have too much to say on the numbers. I can't say whether or not I'm surprised or not because I don't have friends that bet on sports. I don't really follow the sports betting. Even when it comes to the Super Bowl, I don't even know what we're doing on Super Bowl Sunday or if I'm just going to go to bed. But I will say, and this is sort of where I can bring in a little bit of a different perspective here. And of course, it has to link back to traveling. But it's very interesting to me because Delta is now they've partnered with DraftKings, and they're now going to be offering sports betting on airplanes. I think it's just interesting because we're getting to a place where it's not even on your cell phones anymore. Now you get off, you take off from ground, you don't have Wi-Fi on your phone, you can still bet on an airplane TV. And it's very interesting to me to see the way that it's becoming much more of an accepted program when there was a really big narrative for a really long time, especially if you really want to go back to like the Al Capone times. But gambling is dangerous and, it comes with its risks and stuff. And people always pushing it as much as they were outside of casinos and stuff. But now it's really everywhere. You'll see ads for DraftKings, you'll see poster boards, and it's everywhere. So it's a little bit interesting to me now.
Well, so Hunter, you may be going to sleep for the Super Bowl, but I guarantee that Lee's fun fact is not a sleeper.
So 1983, the question was asked of a USA Today poll, other than the Super Bowl or the playoff games, did you watch any of the NFL during this on television? And this was in 1983. The question was asked in 1984. And interestingly, about 2/3 say yes and a third say no. Obviously, the Super Bowl and the playoffs are excluded from those calculations. So I think the number was a pretty healthy number back in 83. And now when you have the old Sunday football, Sunday night football, Monday night football, Thursday football, and they even are going to be introducing on one channel that you can only get by subscribing, a Wednesday game coming up for next year. So, we're missing just Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. And some of that has to do, I suspect, with high school and college football. Got to have it in there somewhere. But, there's no doubt that there seems to be nothing short of an appetite for professional football right now.
And I think football has worked over the many decades since that question has been asked to broaden its market. Mm-hmm. I think it was very much seen as a sport that mostly men were interested in, and certainly men who are interested and follow football still do outnumber women, but there is a very strong following among both men and women when it comes to football. And again, you don't have to be a football fan to enjoy Super Bowl Sunday.
I'm going to email Hunter and ask him who won. Maybe I'll wait till Monday.
You know what? He may not like sports, but I bet Hunter has a few friends. And so it's going to be hard to be a social person and not be connected in some way to the food, the commercials, or the game.
On the sport. It's probably the one biggest event that not everybody, but most people are involved with in not just sports. We don't have many events that everybody does. And this is the one that comes closest.
While we're sitting here, I actually just got a text figuring out that we are hosting the Super Bowl Sunday party. Yay. This would be the second year that we're doing so, and I still don't watch football. But this question is very interesting, and I think you guys, at least Lee and Barb, might really like this one. But I don't really watch football. I was never a big football fan until I got involved in New York State politics very closely. And then the longer I got involved in New York State politics, I realized that if I wanted to be able to hold a conversation, especially with someone like Governor Hochul, I needed to be a Bills fan. And I needed to be following their wins and their losses and their team.
Wow.
So for years, I've been a self-declared Bills fan purely because it helps me politically.
There you go.
I think New Yorkers have always been pretty serious about their sports teams.
And congratulations to Hunter for getting the second of Lee's favorite topics into the conversation.
Yeah. So here's your trivia. Let's end with a trivia question. What professional football team won the Super Bowl before a man walked on the moon and hasn't returned to the Super Bowl since?
Is it the Jets?
Yes, Neil.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
Whoa.
Joe
Super
Namath
Bowl
back in-
number 3, which was actually the first one that was called the Super Bowl. They were called the championship game before that.
They beat the Colts, right?
Joe Namath beat the Colts in a huge upset, and that was 1969, before Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon, and the Jets haven't been back since. Not that I'm rubbing it in, but that's the way it is, and that's the way we're going to have to leave it. Hopefully your team wins. How's that? And you win your bet.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Hunter Petro and Neil Viswanathan.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.